Hello guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be making my early 2022 NHL standings and Stanley Cup playoff predictions. Now, we are less than 2 months away from the NHL playoffs officially beginning, and they cannot come fast enough, but there's a lot that can change between now and then. So which teams do I see making the playoffs, and by the end of it, which team do I see winning the Stanley Cup in 2022? Watch till the end for all my predictions and the full bracket picks, and make sure you hit the subscribe button to the Sportsnet YouTube channel for the best sports coverage around. And without further ado, let's get straight into it. Now, before we get into the playoff predictions, we first need to go through all 4 divisions to see which teams make the playoffs and miss the playoffs, and also see who will face who in the first round of the playoffs as well. Now, we're going to start out in the Metro Division, and especially when it comes to the East, there is so much on the line with seeding, where these teams place in their divisions. It matters a lot for the first round, especially for a couple of teams in the Metro. But at number 1, I have the Carolina Hurricanes grabbing the top spot in not just the Metro, but the Eastern Conference as well, with 115 points on the year. Their consistency has been fantastic, and we've talked about the Avs being a fantastic team and the best in the league, but the Canes have not been too far behind and have been as consistent as well. Now going on to number 2 though, next up I have the Pittsburgh Penguins. I see them grabbing 107 points on the season and getting that home ice advantage for the first round, which is ever important for them. They've still dealt with some pretty major health issues this year, but Mike Sullivan deserves so much credit for keeping this team like a contender throughout the regular season. Then going on to number 3, we have the rising New York Rangers. I see them getting 99 points on the year. Although they've been especially funky as of these past couple of weeks, I think Igor Stricken will continue his fantastic season into the second half and continue the great play in the last few weeks. Then going on to the 4th team, this is the first wildcard team in the East, and I have the Washington Capitals. It's pretty much a guarantee that they'll make the playoffs, but they've been a kind of weird team over the past couple of months. Momentum has not really been on their side, honestly, and I feel like they're a team that could have some big troubles in the first round. But now going on to the Atlantic Division, and this is a really interesting one because we already know which teams are going to make the playoffs. The order in which they make it is going to be extremely important for a couple of these teams. Now, going on to the first spot, I have the Florida Panthers just barely getting the lead in this division with 110 points on the year. I think the goaltending had a little bit of a slump in these past couple of months, but I think it will bounce back in the last couple of months of the year. Then going on to number 2, I have the other Florida team in the Tampa Bay Lightning, just barely losing out in the division with 109 points, but still, I think they've been ever dominant, and still, it speaks to the strength of this Tampa organization that they're still this good. Then going on to number 3, this is actually a little bit of a hot take, but I have the Boston Bruins overtaking the Leafs and getting that 3rd spot with 104 points on the year. They're right behind the Leafs and have serious momentum. They're 8-1-1 in their past 10. Jeremy Swayman has been unbelievable in net in the past month. I think they will overtake the Leafs mostly because of that goaltending and momentum on their side. And then coming in at number 4 in the wildcard spot, in the first wildcard spot, I have the Toronto Maple Leafs. Still, they'll finish with 102 points, be right behind the Boston Bruins, but I think the goaltending issues that you're seeing a lot of right now will definitely bury them if they aren't able to get another option in net. But now going on to the Western Conference, this is where it gets exceedingly interesting because there's like 6 different teams fighting for those last 2 wildcard spots, and it'll be an absolute battle right to the very end, and it's a pretty wide open race as well. Even the Canucks are in it now, which is great to see. But we're going to start out in the Pacific Division, see which teams make the playoffs, which a little bit of a spoiler alert, there's not too many, but we're going to start out at number 1 and go to the Calgary Flames to start off. I think they'll finish with 105 points in the year, and I'm pretty sure this is the Flames division to lose, especially with the Kings' injury woes over the past couple weeks. I think the Flames almost automatically get this spot. Now going on to number 2, I'm going to go to the aforementioned LA Kings. I see them finishing with 99 points on the season, and although the injuries have been rough for them over the past couple months, I could see them making a couple of pretty big trade deadline acquisitions, and with the chemistry of that lineup coming through in the last few weeks, I think they will get a pretty solid playoff spot too. Now going on to number 3, this is where it goes all down, because personally for me, I see there being 2 teams to make it in the wildcard race in the Central, and I feel like there'll only be 3 teams in the Pacific to make the playoffs. It's between the Oilers, the Golden Knights, and the Canucks are in that race as well, even the Ducks if you want to mention them too. But at this 3rd spot, I see the Edmonton Oilers making the playoffs with 93 points in the year, definitely being the worst team to make the playoffs, but at the same time, they'll just barely get that spot. As for the other teams, I see the Golden Knights being just 1 point behind and the Jack Eichel curse continuing at number 4. Then I have the Canucks at 90, the Ducks at 88, the Sharks at 83, and the seriously disappointing Seattle Kraken at 60 points on the season. But now going on to the Central Division, a division in my opinion that will see 5 different playoff teams, and starting out at number 1, I have the Colorado Avalanche. This is the automatic spot. This is going to happen, and even though they have some pretty big injuries in Girard and Landeskog, I don't see them that really stopping them too much, and I think they'll get 123 points on the season. Coming in at number 2 though, this is where it starts to get a lot more close, but at this spot, I think this will be where the St. Louis Blues finish. 103 points on the year. A lot of that has been because of Ville Husso and the great depth play along the roster. I think this Blues team is pretty interesting and could do some damage come playoff time. Then going on to number 3 and the team that they will face in the first round, I have the Minnesota Wild just behind them with 100 points, and although they've definitely been struggling over the past couple of months, I still see them potentially making a couple of additions at the trade deadline and hopefully finishing strong to end off the season. Now going into our last couple of playoff teams here, at number 4, I'm going to have the Nashville Predators. I see them finishing with 97 points and getting that first wildcard spot. They're a team that's been way better than I would have ever expected this year, with Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson being the true centers that we knew they could be, but haven't unlocked yet, and UC Saros being an absolute amazing Vezina candidate. There's a lot to like with this Preds team, and I think they will get that first wildcard spot. Now, going into the last actual playoff spot of my predictions, I might be a little bit biased here, but I do see the Dallas Stars taking this second spot. I see them finishing with 95 points in the year, just being better than the Golden Knights would be with 92 points, and although it's not the best race in terms of points that we've ever seen, at the same time with the Stars, they have a pretty good amount of games in hand, and they could also be a team to potentially add a defenseman at the trade deadline, especially with Miro Heiskanen out. I don't think they'll be amazing when this season comes to a close, but at the same time, I think they'll just be good enough and consistent enough to get that last spot. But now we can officially get inside the playoff predictions and the actual playoff brackets, and I might be a little bit biased here, but with my predictions, there are some absolutely amazing first round matchups in store for us if these actually do happen. And a great example of that is our first matchup here between the Carolina Hurricanes and the Washington Capitals. Now, in terms of rivalry, there is a lot to sink your teeth into here. Obviously, it's a rematch of the 2019 first round where Brock McGinn was the overtime hero in Game 7 to send the Canes to the second round. At the same time, even though there's a great rivalry here, I don't see it being close whatsoever on the ice, and I see the Canes sweeping the Capitals and just making mincemeat of Washington. Now moving on to the next matchup here. This one is a lot closer in my opinion between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the New York Rangers. Now, if you asked me 2 weeks ago who I thought would win this series, I thought the Rangers could pull off an upset and win and go on to the second round. But with the Rangers showing some of their bigger holes over the past couple of weeks, if they don't add some big trade deadline guys, I really don't see them getting past this Penguins team. They've been super consistent, and I think the momentum is on their side, and especially if Shesterkin can't carry them, I think the Rangers might be dead meat in the first round and will lose in 7 games. Now going on to our next Eastern Conference matchup, this one is going to be an absolutely just barn burner series throughout, and that is the Florida Panthers versus the Toronto Maple Leafs. 2 teams that haven't advanced on to the second round in forever, and honestly, I feel like for the Leafs, this might be one of the better matchups they could hope to get, especially versus Tampa. I don't think they're winning that, and I don't think they're winning a series versus the Boston Bruins. It feels like that's never going to happen, honestly. But for the Panthers, they're an interesting team here. They obviously haven't gone past the first round in a while, but they've been kind of shaky and inconsistent, just like the Leafs have been. It'll be a really interesting one, but I also see in the end the Panthers winning in 7 games, just having enough to get past the Leafs and finally advance onto the second round. Though again, for Toronto, if they have any hope of getting past the first round, playing the Panthers, I think would be the best bet, especially if they were to get another goaltender at the deadline. Now going on to the final Eastern Conference matchup in the first round, this is going to be an amazing one between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Boston Bruins. These 2 teams always put on a show in the regular season and the playoffs, and I think that will continue this time around, though I do see the Tampa Bay Lightning having the advantage and winning this one in 6 games. I feel like for Tampa, their experience and their consistency will prove to continue in this year's playoffs. I don't see them winning the Stanley Cup, spoiler alert, but I also see them being a strong team throughout, and for the Bruins, even though the momentum is on their side, I feel like their depth and especially that forward group isn't as strong as it could be, especially to get past Vasilevsky and Tampa. But now going on to the Western Conference first round matchups, the first one is, in my opinion, a pretty solid one in the Colorado Avalanche versus the Dallas Stars. Now, if this series does happen, you can bet on me and producer Drew streaming this thing because it's going to be absolutely amazing. And although I would just be so happy to see the Stars beat the Avalanche again, it is the first round, and the Avalanche don't really lose in those rounds. So for my opinion, as well as the Avs, just overall roster strength and the goaltending being much better than Darcy Kemper, I see the Avalanche winning this one and winning it in 5. Although I hope the Stars keep it close, I still gotta be realistic, especially with this Stars team. But now going on to the next matchup, I have the interesting one between the St. Louis Blues and the Minnesota Wild. This, in my opinion, could be one of the closer first-round matchups, though I do see it going 6 games and the St. Louis Blues winning it. I think a lot of it comes down to the momentum and which team is more playoff ready, and to me, in a lot of categories, the St. Louis Blues are just way more prepared for it. Obviously, the experience is one thing, but that defensive consistency, the goaltending in Ville Husso is way better than what the Minnesota Wild have been able to offer recently, and I think the defenses, Minnesota's been woefully inconsistent over the past month, and I think that could be a big issue come the first round, and I think the Blues will advance on to round 2. Now going on to the next matchup, this is between the Calgary Flames and the Nashville Predators, and I honestly think this series could be closer than meets the eye. Even though I see Calgary doing pretty well in this year's playoffs, I see Nashville giving them a very strong fight and keeping this at 6 games. Although I do see the Flames winning, I see the Preds having a couple of really close games and a couple overtimes deciding it for Calgary in the end. Now going on to our last matchup in the first round, I have the LA Kings versus the Edmonton Oilers, and this is one that I absolutely am going to be tuning in as much as I humanly can. This features a lot of younger talent, a lot of great talent, and to me personally, this is one that I kind of go back and forth on, but in the end, I actually do see the Edmonton Oilers winning this series, and the goaltending being just good enough to get them onto the second round, still not being good, but at least being a factor. And Connor McDavid, I think at this point, is basically doing it now or never. If he can't perform in this year's first round, then the Oilers will obviously be done, but I do think he'll be just good enough and just elite enough to get them onto round 2. But now moving on to the second round, our first matchup here is between the Carolina Hurricanes and the Pittsburgh Penguins, and this, in my opinion, although it won't be the best series in the second round, it'll still be a pretty amazing one, though I do see the Carolina Hurricanes having just an advantage throughout the series and winning it in 6 games. I do see the Pens keeping it close, mostly because of their chemistry and the goaltending being much better than expected, but at the same time, this Canes team is built from head to toe, and although I had some issues coming into the year with goaltending, they have proved me wrong so consistently that it's kind of funny, and I feel like it'll be a big factor for the Canes' playoff success this year. Now going on to the next matchup, this is, in my opinion, the matchup we kind of all want to see, in the Florida Panthers versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Battle of Florida was amazing last year in the first round, but now being in the second round with the stakes even higher, it'll be an absolute bloodbath. So many fights, so many amazing goals. It was the best first round matchup last year, and I think it'll be the best second round matchup this time around. Now going on to the next one, I have the Colorado Avalanche versus the St. Louis Blues. This is another rematch. We saw this last year as well, though the Blues didn't really stand much of a chance. I feel like they're much better this year, though, and I think they'll keep it close between the Avalanche, going to 6 games, though I see the Avalanche overpowering them in the end, and that health and goaltending hopefully being much better than last year was able to provide for the Avs. But we're going to go on to the next matchup here between the Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers. It is here, and it is absolutely beautiful. It's the Battle of Alberta. That is all that needs to be said. A second round matchup as well, and we are absolutely eating it up. This is going to be, well, I was saying the Florida and Tampa one would be the best playoff series, but it's the Battle of Alberta, so this one would be the best playoff series. It would be amazing, and although I see the Oilers keeping it close, I think the Flames will win this one in 6, and especially in that 6th game, I think it'll be a runaway sweep for the Flames. And moving on to the conference finals. Now, I'm realizing that I completely forgot to talk about the Tampa and Florida series and who I thought would win. I think Florida will win that series in 7 games and be one of the final teams remaining in this year's NHL playoffs, which leaves us to the 4 remaining teams in the playoffs this year: the Carolina Hurricanes, the Florida Panthers, the Colorado Avalanche, and the Calgary Flames. Honestly, I wouldn't mind any of these teams winning, though I definitely would be cheering for Calgary for sure. But we're going to go to the Eastern Conference Final to see who will advance on to the Final 2. The Canes and the Panthers, these are, in my opinion, the 2 best teams in the East. But at the same time, I feel like this will be a very interesting series from the goaltending perspective. Will Sergei Bobrovsky be able to keep that poise for the Florida Panthers, especially in the Eastern Conference? That'll be a big question for me, and will that defense stay consistent? I feel like for the Canes, their overall strength, their consistency, all leads me to believe that if they stay healthy, I feel like this is the year they take that next step and move on to the Stanley Cup final. I see it going 6 games and the Canes winning against the Panthers to move on to the final 2. Now that leaves the Colorado Avalanche and the Calgary Flames, and I know I said I wanted the Flames to win and everything, but even though I want that to happen, I don't really see it happening if they face this Avalanche team. For me personally, if the Avalanche are able to get past the second round, they kind of give me 2018 Capitals vibes, where if they get past their second round boogeymen, then I feel like it's cup or bust for this team, honestly. It already is, but if they get past that, I feel like this team could be almost unstoppable, especially when it comes to the mental game there. And if they're able to stay healthy, and if Darcy Kuemper is able to be at least an above-average goaltender, there is so much to like with this Avs team. Even though I love this Flames team and I desperately hope they get back to the Cup final, I feel like the Avs will win this series in 6 and move on to face the Carolina Hurricanes in the 2022 Cup final. And although, yeah, it's the number 1 team in the East and the number 1 team in the West, I still see these two teams, if healthy, pretty much dominating throughout the playoffs and being the final 2 teams left. But now going on to the final matchup in the playoffs and the final games, we have the Stanley Cup final, the Canes versus the Avalanche. And originally when I was making this video, I was predicting the Colorado Avalanche to win this series, not easily, but by a pretty decent margin. But the more I think about it, the more I think it all kind of comes down to goaltending. Darcy Kuemper versus Freddie Anderson. Who's going to be the more consistent and an amazing goaltender in this series? That, to me, will determine pretty much everything. We know these offenses are fantastic. We know both defenses can be absolutely spectacular. But to me, I think both of these teams ride or die with their goaltending. And with Freddie Anderson's inconsistencies in the playoffs and Darcy Kuemper's lack of really many playoff games, it's really hard to judge who will be better come that last series. But I think this series will go to the distance. I think we'll see 7 games in this one. And I feel like, personally, looking at that 7th game, I'm going to predict the Carolina Hurricanes to win the 2022 Stanley Cup. It might be crazy against the Avalanche especially, but I feel like Freddie Anderson is somehow going to continue to be way different from his Leafs days and be a clutch and consistent goaltender in the playoffs. Yes, it would suck for the Leafs, but at the same time, that's what I see happening, and the Canes will be your Stanley Cup winner in 2022. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Comment down below, what do you guys agree and disagree with my predictions? Who do you see making the playoffs? Who do you see winning the Cup in the end? Let me know all your thoughts. Make sure you share this video with your friends, get the playoff predictions out there, and I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.